Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 157, Meno Conclusions. If we listen to what the people in the dialogue Meno actually say, and not what we would like them to say, we should be very disappointed philosophically. There is no philosophical argument. There are many false expectations, and Socrates doesn't help because his refutations, when there are any refutations, are sophistic. Some people would like to see Meno at the beginning of the dialogue asking Socrates to teach him to have arete, virtue. Meno actually asks Socrates to choose one of four options. Can Socrates tell him whether virtue is something teachable or not something teachable but something exercisable, or not something exercisable or learnable but something which comes to people by nature or in some other way? Meno has gathered these options, apparently, from various people. The exercisable virtue he probably heard from gymnasiarchs, people who train in physical activities, because that too is a form of virtue if you become good in physical activities, while learning about virtue would be something a sophist might say, although Gorgias himself wouldn't say that, while arete being something natural is something Meno would have heard from his own parents, because as an aristocrat he is simply born to be good. Meno is simply concerned with collecting the opinions of other people, and we may ask ourselves why he's doing that. The answer would seem to be, just as Socrates points out when it comes to Gorgias, Gorgias teaches people to appear to know. He teaches people to be able to answer any question as befits people who know things. And it would appear, therefore, that knowing is considered a virtue. People wish to appear to be good, therefore they should appear to know. And Meno does this by collecting the opinions of other people so that he can tell people what other people think about any subject, and he will appear to be knowledgeable because he knows what so many other people think about any particular subject. For example, in this case, if he were to be asked what arete is, what virtue is, he could say, I have no problem telling you what virtue is, because I know that Gorgias says this, Socrates says that, and he would have a very generous answer. This is one of the things Gorgias teaches, how to be generous in an answer. Socrates doesn't tell Meno that simply collecting the opinions of others with no attempt at discriminating between them is not the way to go about understanding anything. Instead, he says to Meno that he, Socrates, knows absolutely nothing about virtue, which is a lie. We know that Socrates knows that virtue is the characteristic of a good person, because this is what they go on to talk about, how to be a good person. Furthermore, at the end of the dialogue, Socrates actually answers Meno's fourth option: in any other way does virtue come to people? Socrates says that virtue is a divine portion. In other words, people who are good because of divine intervention in some way. Since Socrates is clearly contradicting himself here, He is either lying at the beginning or at the end, or in both cases. Another problem with Meno's original position is that he considers things in isolation, and virtue for him is exclusively one of those options, either something that can be taught or exercised, or something that comes to people naturally. But he cannot conceive of virtue as having all those aspects. In fact, Socrates answers Meno's question immediately in his first reaction. He says that Meno is not only famous the way that Thessalians are, but he also has the Sophia from Gorgias. But what he says about the Thessalians should have given Meno something to think about. The Thessalians are famous for being horsemen. They have the techne hippike, the craft of raising horses. This is something that you learn and you exercise, and it's passed down from father to son, so it's sort of natural to them. And when it comes to a techne, people can see the results of the techne. They know that someone has the arete of the techne, someone is good at a craft, by looking at the product, the results. One reason why Meno doesn't notice this is because he's actually concentrating on one particular arete, virtue, politike arete, the virtue of a man in the polis. Socrates, by claiming ignorance, manipulates Meno into giving answers rather than getting an answer from Socrates. In the first answer Meno gives, we see the generosity that Gorgias teaches his students to provide, and Meno gives a list of various aretae based on gender, status, and age. Every person has a particular role, and the role that men get is to rule a city, to control a city, and in controlling the city, help their friends and harm their enemies. Socrates refutes this sophistically, and then Meno gives yet another answer he heard from Gorgias, and this one is specifically for the man, and that is to control people, to rule. Socrates doesn't refute this simply by pointing out that virtue is not to do with a particular role, but is to do with behavior, although his refutation would hint to that. Meno's third reply appears to be his own, and it reveals why Meno would want to control other people. It's simply to acquire fine things for himself. Socrates refutes this as well, but it's not done in a philosophically satisfying way. I should mention that during all of this, we also have the examples Socrates gives of definition, and these are by no means philosophically satisfying, but they are prominent enough to make people think that the dialogue has something perhaps to do with definition, among other things. Meno has run out of answers, and he is ecstatic to find that he is in a state of aporia. He's heard that this is what Socrates does to people, and now he will be able to say that he was reduced to this state by Socrates. For Meno, this will serve just as well as if Socrates had given him one of the options about virtue at the beginning of the dialogue. When Socrates pushes for yet another answer about arete, Meno produces the sophistic conundrum: how can we search for what we don't know? And even if we do find what we don't know, because we don't know it, how do we know that we've found it? This would stop the conversation dead in its tracks, but Socrates breaks the impasse not by explaining the sophism, but by introducing yet another one. And this he does by creating a person who knows absolutely nothing and yet knows everything. How does he do this? By the account of priests and priestesses that the soul is eternal, and because it's lived so long, it has seen everything in this world and in Hades, and therefore knows everything. This is a complete tissue of fanciful and unphilosophical notions, but it's enough to persuade Meno to carry on. Socrates points out that if you don't know something, all you have to do is look inside yourself, because your soul knows everything. Meno should have said, if the soul knows only because it's seen things, then I know what I see. But he doesn't say that. We can say that. We need to understand how weak the philosophical arguments are. They're unphilosophical, really. This idiotic account is raised to the level of the theory of recollection by modern-day priests and priestesses who know what Plato actually meant. For them, the theory of recollection explains how people can actually acquire concepts, although, according to Plato's other major theory, the theory of ideas, the ideas are not even in this world. We cannot see them, hear them, touch them. They're somewhere else. So according to the theory of recollection, the ideas are in our soul. We're born with the ideas in us. We may recall from our read-through that Socrates does talk about recollection rather a lot. He keeps telling Meno, recollect this, that, the other, that we actually talked about in the dialogue. And whenever Socrates does that, he recollects wrongly, because he hopes that Meno would react to what he says and say, no, Socrates, you're wrong, this is what we actually said. Because what Socrates wants from Meno is some sign of critical reasoning. Meno does have a memory because he remembers all of the opinions of other people, but he doesn't realize that he should apply this ability to remember things to a conversation. Now, a conversation in Greek is dialogos, and Socrates deals with the techne dialektike, and this is what he would like Meno to begin to acquire. We're still a long way from conclusions.